it working? Yep. Hello, YouTube. Okay. So, let me just readjust this. Good. Hi, YouTube. I mean, either way, I don't have the YouTube or Twitch chat on the screen. So, there we go. And then I'll move over a little bit. Yeah, not bad. Maybe too big. Okay, today we are not reading Call of Cthulhu. Let me change this book out. I forgot to change it. Oh. Oh shit, which is it? Ah. Here one. Okay. I got everything. Ooh. So, tell me if their music is too loud. Gonna adjust this so it's not too loud for me. Okay, so I don't know the stories. I'm not too familiar, so this is just me reading things for the first time. My book has illustrations. Nice. Okay, chapter 1. What the hell? Why is there people talking? Is the music too loud? Tell me if it is. Chapter 1. During the winter of 1927 to 28, officials of the federal government made a strange and secret investigation of certain conditions in the ancient Massachusetts seaport of Innsmouth. The public first learned of it in February, when a vast series of raids and arrests occurred, followed by the deliberate burning and dynamiting under suitable precautions of an enormous number of crumbling, worm-eaten, and supposedly empty houses along the abandoned waterfront. Uninquiring souls let this occurrence pass as one of the major clashes in a spasmodic war on liquor. Keener news followers, however, wondered at the prodigious number of arrests, the abnormally large force of men used in making them, and the secrecy surrounding the disposals of the prisoners. No trials or even definite charges were reported, nor were any of the captives seen thereafter in the regular jails. There were vague statements about disease, concentration camps, and later about dispersal in various naval and military missions. But nothing positive ever developed. Innsmouth itself was left almost depopulated, and it is even now only beginning to show signs of a sluggish, revived existence. Music is kind of bothersome. Should be better. Complaints from many liberal organizations were met with long confidential discussions, and representatives were taken on trips to certain camps and prisons. As a result, these societies became surprisingly passive and reticent. Newspapermen were harder to manage, but seemed largely to cooperate with the government in the end. Only one paper, a tabloid always discounted because of its wild policy, mentioned the deep-diving submarine that discharged torpedoes downwards in the marine abyss just beyond Devil Reef. That item, gathered by chance in a haunt of sailors, seemed indefinite. well, I'm making up words. That item, gathered by chance in a haunt of sailors, seemed indeed rather far-fetched, since the low black reef lay a full mile and a half out from Innsmouth harbour. Reading's hard. People around the country and in the nearby towns muttered a great deal amongst themselves, but said very little to the outer world. They had talked about dying and half deserted for nearly a century, and nothing new could be wilder or more hideous than what they had whispered, hinted at years before. Many things had taught themselves secretiveness, and there was no need to exert pressure on them. Besides, they really knew little, for wide salt marshes, desolate and unpeopled, kept neighbours off from Innsmouth on the landward side. But at last I am going to defy the ban on speech about this thing. Results, I'm certain, are so thorough that no public harm save a shock of repulsion would ever accrue from a hinting of what was found by those horrified men at Innsmouth. Besides, what was found might possibly have more than one explanation. I do not know just how much of the whole tale has been told even to me, and I have many reasons for not wishing to probe deeper. For my contact with this affair has been closer than that of any other layman, and I have carried away impressions which are yet to drive me to drastic measures. It was I who fled frantically out of Innsmouth in the early morning hours of July 16, 1927, and whose frightened appeals for government inquiry and action brought on the whole report episode. I was willing enough to stay mute while the affair was fresh and uncertain, but now that it is an old story with public interest and curiosity gone, I have an odd craving to whisper about those few frightful hours in that ill-rumoured and evilly shadowed seaport of death and blasphemous abnormality. The mere telling helps me restore confidence in my own faculties, to reassure myself that I was not the first to succumb to contagious nightmare hallucination. Helps me, too, in making up my mind regarding a certain terrible step which lies ahead of me. Scotty knows Stacy's mum. Hi, so long since I've been in here, and holy shit, you still exist hotter than the surface of a million suns. Hi, thank you. Oh yeah, I forgot, I need to check my channel points. Make sure that I need to fix this. Dun 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 dun. Good. Where am I up to? I never heard of Innsmouth till the day before I saw it for the first and so far last time. I was celebrating my coming of age by a tour of New England, sightseeing, antiquarian, and genealogical, and had planned to go directly from ancient Newburyport to Arkham, whence my mother's family was derived. Ah yes, hydrate. You'll probably make this one cost more. What, hydrate? Wait, what's Arkham? I had no car, but was travelling by train, trolley, and motor coach, always seeking the cheapest possible route. In Newburyport, they told me that the steam train was the thing to take to Arkham, and it was only at the station ticket office, when I demurred at the high fare, that I learned about Innsmouth. The stout, shrewd-faced agent, whose speech showed him to be no local man, sympathetic towards my efforts at economy, and made a suggestion that none of my other informants had offered. Hello, Berm. I do not know anything with Slapper. Ah, right. Da, 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 da. How do I ban someone? Da, 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 da. Okay, what am I up to? The stout, shrewd, face agent. Yep, got it. The Batman thing. Kinda cute. Ah, would take that old bus, I suppose, he said with a certain hesitation. But it ain't thought much about. But it ain't thought much of hereabouts. It goes through Innsmouth. May have heard about that, and so the people don't like it. Run by an Innsmouth fellow, Joe Sargent, but never gets any custom from here or Arkham either, I guess. Wonder it keeps running at all. I suppose it's cheap enough, but I never see more'n 2 or 3 people in it. Nobody but those Innsmouth folk. Leaves the square, front of Hammond's drugstore, at 10 a.m. and 7 p.m., unless they've changed lately. Looks like a terrible rattle trap. I've never been on it. That was the first I had ever heard of shadowed Innsmouth. Any reference to a town not shown on common maps or listed in recent guidebooks would have interested me, and the agent's odd manner of allusion roused something like real curiosity. A town able to inspire such dislike its neighbours, I thought must be at least rather unusual and worthy of a tourist's attention. If it came before Arkham, I would stop off there. I would stop off there, and so I asked the agent to tell me something about it. He was very deliberate and spoke with an air of feeling slightly superior to what he said. Innsmouth. Well, it's a queer town of a wait. Well, it's a queer kind of a town down at the mouth of the next Manuzet. Manuzet used to be almost a city, quite a port before the war of 1812, but all gone to pieces the last 100 years or so. No railroad now. B&M never went through, and branch line from Rowley was given up years. More empty houses than there are people, I guess, and no business to speak of except fishing and lobstering. Everyone trades. Everybody trades mostly either here or in Arkham or Ipswich. Once they had quite a few mills, but nothing's left now except one gold refinery running on the leanest kind of part time. That refinery, though, used to be a big thing. And old man Marsh, who owns it, must be rich and crosius. Queer old duck, though, and sticks mighty close to his home. He's supposed to have developed some skin disease or deformity late in life that makes him keep out of sight. Grandson of Captain Obed Marsh, who founded the business, his mother seems to have been some kind of foreigner. They say a South Sea Islander, so everybody raised Cain when he married an Ipswich girl 50 years ago. They always do that about Innsmouth people, and folks here and hereabouts always try to cover up any Innsmouth blood they have in them. But Master's children and grandchildren look just like anyone else, far as I can see. I've had 'em pointed out to me here, though, come to think of it. The elder children don't seem to be around lately. Never saw the old man. And why is everybody so down on Innsmouth? Well, young fellow, you mustn't take too much stock in what people here say. They're hard to get started, but once they do get started, they never let up. They've been telling things about Innsmouth, whispering them. Mostly for the last 100 years, I guess, and I gather they're more scared than anything else. Some of the stories would make you laugh. But old Captain Marsh driving bargains with the devil and bringing imps out of hell to live in Innsmouth, or about some kind of devil worship. and awful sacrifices in some place near the walls that people stumbled on around 1845 or thereabouts. But I come from Panton, Vermont, and that kind of story don't go down with me. You ought to hear, though, what some of the old timers tell about the Black Reef off the coast. Devil Reef, they call it. It's well above water a good part of the time, and never much below it, but at that you could hardly call it an island. The story is that there's a whole legion of devils, seen sometimes on that reef, sprawled about, or darting in and out of some kind of caves near the top. It's a rugged, uneven thing, a good bit over a mile out, and towards the end of shipping days, sailors used to make big detours just to avoid it. That is, sailors that didn't hail from Innsmouth. One of the things they had against old Captain Marsh was that he was supposed to land on it sometimes at night when the tide was right. Maybe he did, for I dare say the rock formation was interesting, and that's just barely possible. He was looking for a pirate loot and maybe finding it. Hi, Rattle Warehouse. Hi, thanks for the follow as well. But there was talk of his dealing with demons here. Fact is, I guess on the whole, it was really the captain that gave the bad reputation. Lou. That was before the big epidemic of 1846, when over half the folks in Innsmouth was carried off. They never did quite figure out what the trouble was, but it was probably some foreign kind of disease brought from China or somewhere by the shipping. It surely was bad enough. There was riots over it and all sorts of ghastly things, and all sorts of ghastly doings that I don't believe ever got outside of town, and it's left the place in awful shape. Never came back. There can't be more than 300 400 people living there now. Hello. But the real thing behind the way folks feel is simply race prejudice. And I don't say I'm blaming those that hold it. I hate those Innsmouth folks myself, and I wouldn't care to go to their town. I suppose you know. Though I can see you're a Westerner by your talk. What a lot our New England ships used to have to do with queer ports in Asia, the South Seas, and everywhere else, and what queer kinds of people they sometimes brought back with them. You've probably heard about the Salem man that came home with a Chinese wife, and maybe you know there's still a bunch of Fiji Islanders somewhere around Cape. Well, there must be something like that back of the Innsmouth people. The place always was badly cut off from the rest of the country by marshes and creeks, and we can't be sure about the ins and outs of the matter. But it is pretty clear that old Captain Marsh must have brought home some odd specimens when he had all three of his ships in commission back in the 20s and 30s. There certainly is a strange kind of streak in the Innsmouth today. I don't know how to explain it, but it sort of makes you crawl. You'll notice a little in the sergeant take his bus. Some of them have queer, narrow heads with flat noses and bulgy, starry eyes that never seem to shut. And their skin ain't quite right, rough and scabby, and the sides of the necks are all shriveled and stuff. Yet bold, though very young. The older fellows look the worst. Fact is, I don't believe I've ever seen a very old chap of that kind. Guess they must die of looking in the glass. Animals hate 'em. They used to have lots of horse trouble before the autos came in. Nobody around here or in Arkham or Ipswich will have anything to do with them. And they act kind of offish themselves when they come to town or when anyone tries to fish on their ground. Queer how fish are always thick off Innsmouth Harbour when there ain't any anywhere else around. But just try to fish there yourself and see how the folks chase you off. Those people used to come here on the railroad, walking and taking the train at Rowley after the branch was dropped. But now they use that bus. Damn, this guy's talking a lot. Yes, there's a hotel in Innsmouth called the Gilman House. Hello, Gemini. But I don't believe it can amount to much. I wouldn't advise you to try it. Better stay over here and take the 10 o'clock bus tomorrow morning. Then you can get an evening bus here for Arkham. Evening bus there for Arkham at 8 o'clock. There was a factory inspector who stopped at the Gilman a couple years ago, and he had a lot of unpleasant hints about the place. Seems to get a queer crowd there, but this fellow heard voices in other rooms, though most of them was empty. Gave him the shivers. It was foreign talk, he thought, and he said the bad thing about it was a kind of voice that sometimes spoke. It sounded so unnatural, flopping like, he said, that he didn't dare undress and go to sleep. Just waited up and lit out the first thing in the morning. The talk went on most all night. This fellow, Casey, his name was, had a lot to say about how the Innsmouth folk watched him and seemed kind of on guard. He found the Marsh refinery a queer place. It's in an old mill on the lower floors of the Manuzette. What he said tallied up with what I heard. Books in bad shape, and no clear account of any kind of dealings. You know it's always been a kind of mystery where the Marshes get the gold they refine. They never seem to do much buying in that line, but years ago they shipped out an enormous lot of ingots. I'm struggling to read again. Used to be talk of a queer foreign kind of jewelry that the sailors and refinery men sometimes sold on the sly, or that was seen once or twice on some of the Marsh women folks. People think maybe old Captain Obed traded for it in some heathen port, especially since he always ordered stacks of glass beads and trinkets, such as seafaring men used to get for a native trade. Others thought and still think he'd found an old pirate cache out on Devil Reef. But here's a funny thing. The old captain's been dead these 60 years, and there's ain't been a good-sized ship out of the place since the Civil War. But just the same, the Marshes still keep on buying a few of those native trade things. Mostly glass and rubber gewgaws, they tell me. Maybe the Innsmouth folks like them to look at themselves. God knows they've gotten to be about as bad as South Sea cannibals and Guinea savages. That plague of 46 must have taken off the best blood in the place. Anyway, they're a doubtful lot now, and the Marshes and other rich folks are as bad as any. As I told you, there probably ain't more than 400 people in the whole town in spite of all the streets they say there are. I guess they're what they call white trash, down south, lawless and sly, and full of secret things. They get a lot of fish and lobsters and do exporting by truck. Queer how the fish swarm right there and nowhere else. Nobody can ever keep track of these people, and state school officials and census men have a devil of a time. You can bet that prying strangers ain't welcome round Innsmouth. I've heard personally of more than one business or government man that's disappeared there, and there's loose talk of one who went crazy and is out and at Danvers now. They must have fixed up some awful scare for that fellow. Carlos, hello. Iris? Is that I or is that L? Hello. That's why I wouldn't go at night if I was. I've never been there and have no wish to go. But I guess a daytime trip wouldn't hurt you, even though the people's hereabouts will advise you not to make it. If you're just sightseeing and looking for old time stuff, Innsmouth ought to be quite a place for you. Hi? Oh, it's an I. Kai, hello. And so I spent part of that evening at the Newburyport Public Library looking up data about Innsmouth. When I had tried to question the natives in the shops, the lunchroom, the garages, the fire station, I had found them even harder to get started than the ticket agent had predicted, and realized that I could not spare the time to overcome their first instinctive reticence. They had a kind of obscure suspiciousness, as if there was something amiss with anyone too much interested in Innsmouth. At the YMCA where I was stopping, the clerk merely discouraged my going to such a dismal, decadent place, and the people at the library showed much the same attitude. Clearly, in the eyes of the educated, Innsmouth was merely an exaggerated case of civic degeneration. How are you? The Essex County histories on the library shelves had very little to say, except that the town was founded in 1643, noted for shipbuilding before the Revolution, seat of great prosperity in the early 19th century, and later a minor factory using the manizette as power. The epidemic and riots of 1846 were very sparsely treated, as if they formed a discredit to the county. References to decline were few, though the significance of the later record was unmistakable. After the Civil War, all industrial life was confined to the Marsh Refining Company. The marketing of gold ingots formed the only remaining major commerce aside from the eternal. That fishing paid less and less as the price of the commodity fell, and large-scale corporations competition. But there was never a dearth of fish around Innsmouth Harbour. Foreigners seldom settled there, and there was some discreetly veiled evidence that a number of Poles and Portuguese who had tried it had been scattered in a peculiarly drastic fashion. Most interesting of all was a glancing reference to the strange jewelry vaguely associated with Innsmouth. It had evidently impressed the whole countryside more than a little, for mention was made of specimens in the Museum of Miskatonic University at Arkham. In the display room of the Newburyport Historical Society. Oh, in the display room of the Newburyport Historical Society. The fragmentary descriptions of these things were bold and prosaic, but they hinted to me an undercurrent of persistent strangeness. Something about them seemed so odd and provocative that I could not put them out of my mind, and despite the relative lateness of the hour, I resolved to see the local sample, said to be a large, queerly proportioned thing evidently meant for a tiara. It could possibly be arranged. The librarian gave me a note of introduction to the curator of the society, Miss Anna Tilton, who lived nearby, and after a brief explanation, that ancient gentlewoman was kind enough to pilot me into the closed building, since the hour was not outrageously late. The collection was a notable one indeed, but in my present mood I had eyes for nothing but the bizarre object which glistened in a corner cupboard under the electric lights. It took no excessive sensitiveness to beauty to make me literally gasp at the strange, unearthly splendor of the alien, opulent fantasy that rested there on a purple velvet cushion. Even now I can hardly describe what I saw, though it was clearly enough a sort of tiara, as the description had said. It was tall in front, and with a very large and curiously irregular periphery, as if designed for a head of almost freakishly elliptical outline. The material seemed to be predominantly gold, though a weird lighter lustrousness hinted at some strange alloy with an equally beautiful and scarcely identifiable metal. Its condition was almost perfect, and one could have spent hours in studying the striking and puzzlingly untraditional designs, some simply geometrical, some plainly marine, chased or moulded in high relief on its surface with a craftsmanship of incredible skill and grace. The longer I looked, the more the thing fascinated me, and in this fascination there was a curiously disturbing element. hardly to be classified or accounted for. At first, I decided that it was the queer otherworldly quality of the art which made me uneasy. All other objects, all other art objects I had ever seen either belonged to some known racial or national stream, or else were consciously modernistic defiances of every recognized stream. This tiara was neither. It clearly belonged to some settled technique of infinite maturity and perfection, yet that technique was utterly remote from any Eastern or Western, ancient or modern, which I had ever heard of or seen exemplified. It was as if the workmanship were that of another planet. However, I soon saw that my uneasiness had a second and perhaps equally potent source residing in the pictorial and mathematical suggestion of the strange designs. The patterns all hinted of remote secrets and unimaginable abysses in time and space, and the monotonously aquatic nature of the reliefs became almost sinister. Among these reliefs were fabulous monsters of abhorrent grotesqueness and malignity, half ichthyc and half batrachian in suggestion, which one could not dissociate from a certain haunting and uncomfortable sense of pseudo-memory, as if they called up some image from deep cells and tissues whose retentive functions are wholly primal, awesomely ancestral. At times I fancied that every contour of these blasphemous fish frogs was overflowing with the ultimate quintessence of unknown and inhuman. Ugh. In contrast to the tiara's aspect was its brief and prosy history, as related by Miss Tilton. It had been pawned for a ridiculous sum at a shop in State Street in 1873 by a drunken Innsmouth man shortly afterwards, killed in a brawl. The society had acquired it directly from the pawnbroker, at once giving it a display of worthy of its quality. It was labelled as of probable East Indian or Indo-Chinese provenance, though the attribution was frankly tentative. Will follow no la saint. Hello. Miss Tilton, comparing all possible hypotheses regarding its origin and its presence in New England, was inclined to believe that it formed part of some exotic pirate horde discovered by old Captain Obed Marsh. How are you? This view was surely not weakened by the insistent offers of purchase at a high price which the Marshes began to make as soon as they knew of its presence, and which they repeated to this day despite the Society's unvarying determination not to sell. You do book reading recommendations? I stick to the what is it called again? What are they called again? The ones that are old that aren't copyright. Those ones. I forgot what it's called. And it depends on what it is. A tailless amphibian. What was that? What were you suggesting? Wait, what is this? What is it called again? Let me just Google copy. Public domain. Yeah, public domain books because of copyright issues and yeah. Ichthyc. Fish like batrachian, huh? Ichthyc. Batrachian. 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 Ah, batrachian. I know what you're talking about now. From YouTube the other day. If you remember, I said I'll download Twitch if I. Ah, I remember. You didn't have to download it just for me. I am gonna try to multi-stream onto YouTube when I can. I won't be doing reading. I won't be doing the Monday reading stream next week. Because I have an appointment, so nothing next week Monday. Yeah, but YouTube chat is boring. Not much happens here as well. Honestly, not much happens on either streams. Are you new? Oh, you're new to Twitch. Do you know what happens on Twitch? Like the stuff, usual stuff, like the channel points and stuff. I still have a few things that are a bit broken. I'm not new. I just don't use it very often. Same. I think recently I haven't been on Twitch much as a viewer. Okay, Miss Tilton, comparing all possible hypotheses regarding its origin and its presence in New England, was inclined to believe that it formed part of some exotic pirate horde discovered by old Captain Obed Marsh. This view was surely not weakened by the insistent offers of purchase at a higher price which the Marshes began to make soon as they knew of its presence, and which they repeated to this day despite the Society's unvarying determination to not sell. I've had this account for years. Yeah, same. I had my account for a while before I started streaming. No, actually, no, I had to make a new one. I made a new one for stream. As the good lady showed me out of the building, she made it clear that the pirate theory of the Marsh fortune was a popular one among the intelligent people of the region. Her own attitude towards shadowed Innsmouth, she never seen, was one of disgust at a community slipping far down the cultural scale, and she assured me that the rumors of devil worship were partly justified by a peculiar secret cult which had gained force there and engulfed all the orthodox churches. It was called, she said, the esoteric order of Dagon, and was undoubtedly a debased, quasi-pagan thing imported from the east a century before, at a time when the Innsmouth fisheries seemed to be going barren. Its persistence among a simple people was quite natural in view of the sudden and permanent return of abundantly fine fishing, and it soon came to the great influence in the town, replacing Freemasonry altogether and taking up headquarters in the old Masonic Hall, New Church Green. All this, to the pious Miss Tilton, formed an excellent reason for shunning the ancient town of decay and desolation. But to me, it was merely a fresh incentive. To my architectural, historical and my historical anticipations was now added an acute anthropological zeal, and I could scarcely sleep in my small room at the Y as the night wore away. This one is a bit long. That was chapter 1. Wow. It is long. How many chapters is it? 5 chapters. Wow. 5 chapters. I'm not gonna do the whole thing today. Probably do half and then do the other half in 2 weeks' time. Oh yes, hydrate, thank you. Yeah, there's no way. It's too long. Just this one chapter was hard. Shortly before 10 the next morning. So this is chapter 2. Chapter 2. Shortly before 10 the next morning, I stood with one small valise in front of Hammond's drugstore in Old Market Square, waiting for the Innsmouth bus. As the hour for its arrival drew near, I noticed a general drift of the loungers to other places up the street. or to the ideal lunch across the square. Evidently, the ticket agent had not exaggerated the dislike which local people bore towards Innsmouth and its denizens. In a few moments, a small motor coach of extreme decrepitude and dirty grey colour rattled down State Street, made a turn, and drew up at the curb beside me. I felt immediately that it was the right one, a guess with which the half illegible sign on the windshield, Arkham Innsmouth Newburyport, soon verified. It gets easier to read, I think, the further you get into it, I think, probably. It's just long, very descriptive, I think. Yeah, very descriptive. There were only 3 passengers, dark, unkempt men of sullen and visage and somewhat youthful cast, and when the vehicle stopped, they clumsily shambled out and began walking up State Street in a silent, almost furtive fashion. The driver also alighted, and I watched him as he went into the drugstore to make some purchase. This, I reflected, must be the Joe Sargent mentioned by the agent. And even before I noticed any details, there spread over me a wave of spontaneous aversion which could neither be checked nor explained. It suddenly struck me as very natural that the local people should not wish to ride on a bus owned and driven by this man, or to visit any oftener than possible the habitat of such a man and his kinsfolk. Thanks for following. I'm joking. We have read more descriptive things. This is within the normal range, I think. Oh man, oh man, I don't remember. I think I just struggle in. I'm gonna drink. Hi hi. Hoi hoi. Hoi hoi. I'm resting my tongue. When the driver came out of the store, I looked at him more carefully and tried to determine the source of my evil impression. He was a thin, stoop-shouldered man, not much under 6 feet tall, dressed in shabby blue civilian clothes and wearing a frayed golf cap. Well, was very pretty. Thank you. The artist is correct. He drew it with a mouse. I'm just telling everyone. He drew it with a mouse. His age was perhaps 35, but the odd decreases in the size of his made him seem older when one did not study his dull, expressionless face. He had a narrow head, bulging, watery blue eyes that seemed never to wink, a flat nose, a receding forehead and chin, and singularly undeveloped ears. His long, thick lip and coarse-pawed greyish cheeks seemed almost beardless except for some sparse yellow hairs that straggled and curled in irregular patches, and in places the surface seemed queerly irregular, as if peeling from some cutaneous disease. His hands were large and heavily veined, and had a very unusual greyish-blue tinge. The fingers were strikingly short in proportion to the rest of the structure, seemed to have a tendency to curl closely into the huge palm. As he walked towards the bus, I observed his peculiarly shambling gait and saw that his feet were inordinately immense. The more I studied them, the more I wondered how he could buy any shoes to fit them. Are they fish? Drew with a mouse, that's cracked. Yes, I know. I know. But now he has a tablet. He didn't have one when he drew mine. Are they fish? A certain greasiness about the fellow increased my dislike. He was evidently given to working or lounging around the fish docks and carried with him much of their characteristic smell. Just what foreign blood was in him I could not even guess. His oddities certainly did not look Asiatic, Polynesian, Levantine, or Negroid, yet I could see why the people found him alien. I myself would have thought of biological degeneration rather than alienage. Hello, Totaku. I don't know, are they? Are they fish? They're fish people? Alien fish people. Fish. I was sorry when I saw there would be no other passengers on the bus. Somehow I did not like the idea of riding alone with this driver, but as leaving time obviously approached, I conquered my qualms and followed the man aboard, sending him $1 bill and murmuring the single word, Innsmouth. He looked curiously at me for a second as he returned 40 cents change without speaking. I took a seat far behind him and on the same side of the bus, since I wished to watch the shore during the journey. That did the wrong emote. Ah, even. Hello. Why does it keep trying to do the side smile? Oh, it's because of the Hello, even. Let me just change it. So it's, I think the NVIDIA one, it does that. The other one doesn't. There, hang on. Hello, even. How was your stream? How was your stream? Hello. Rudy. Even. No, it does that. Stream was good and chilled. Wait, what were you doing again? Dynasty Warriors, right? Did you get all your short-haired waifus? Every single short-haired waifus that you'll want? How's the reading going? I'm struggling. Words are hard. Short-haired waifus. Catch 'em all. Game refuses to give me waifus, and when I got one, I had to fight her. Oh. No, it's always about waifus. It's always about the short-haired waifus. Waifus. If you need to do any post-stream stuff, please go ahead. I'm a simple man, okay? If hair short, it's good. Basically. If hair short, good. Simple. Easy. You do the same because it's just all in that game. I don't know. I think for me, it's usually the childish guys. The ones that don't look childish but are childish. You know? That's why they're all a little bit crazy. Yeah. I don't think it's, yeah. I don't know. It's just when they're childish, it's fun. And that's probably why I like Matt Smith as the Doctor. He's a little bit childish. And it's fun. Oh. They probably exist in that game. Haven't seen them yet. Yeah, but in a game, how do you figure out someone's personality? How do you figure out personality from a game? Is it possible to get a tongue cramp? Tongue is a muscle. Oh, okay. What am I up to? That's over. I'm not, because that would suck to get a cramp there. I probably should have warmed up. Blah. Ever had one at least? I'm gonna Google this. I'm gonna search this up. Is it possible to get tongue cramp? It is possible. Oh. Bellamy, is that your name? Bellamy, exquisite model, thank you. It's an old one, actually. This is quite an old model. And drawn with a mouse. It is. I got it. It was completed mid 2022. Yeah, 2022. Early to mid 2022. And I would consider it old because the artist's style has changed. Has changed a little bit. It was gradual over the years, but comparing how he would draw the model now versus this one, it is quite a big difference. Okay. At length, the decrepit vehicle steered with a jerk and rattled noisily past the old bricks building of State Street amidst a cloud of sepulture from the exhaust. Glancing at the people on the sidewalks, I thought I detected in them a curious wish to avoid looking at the bus, or at least a wish to avoid seeming to look at it. When we turned to the left into High Street, when we turned to the left into High Street, where the going was smoother, flying by stately old mansions, early Republic, still older colonial farmhouses, passing the Lower Green and Parker River, finally merging into a long, monotonous stretch of open shore country. Yes, we are reading. The day was warm and sunny, but the landscape of sand and sedge grass and stunted shrubbery became more and desolate as we proceeded. Out the window, I could see the blue water and the sandy line of Plum Island, and we presently drew very near the beach as our narrow road veered off from the main highway to Rowley and Ipswich. There were no visible houses, and I could tell by the state of the road that traffic was very light hereabouts. The weather-worn telephone poles carried only two wires. Now and then we crossed a crude wooden bridge over tidal creeks that wound far inland and promoted the general isolation of the region. Thanks for the follow, Bellamy. Once in a while, I noticed a dead. Eh? Once in a while, I noticed dead stumps and crumbling foundation walls above the drifting sea, and recalled the old tradition quoted in one of the histories I had read, that this was once a fertile and thickly settled countryside. The change, it was said, came simultaneously with Innsmouth epidemic of 46, and was thought by simple folk to have a dark connection with hidden forces of evil. Actually, it was caused by the unwise cutting of woodland near the shore, robbed the soil of the best protection and opened the way for waves of wind. At last we lost sight of Plum Island and saw the vast expanse of the open Atlantic on our left. Our narrow course began to climb steeply, and I felt a singular sense of disquiet in looking at the lonely crest ahead where the rutted roadway met the sky. It was as if the bus were about to keep on its keep on in its ascent, leaving the sane earth altogether and merging with the unknown arcana of upper air and cryptical sky. The smell of the sea took on ominous implications, and the silent driver's bent, rigid back and narrow head became more and more hateful. As I looked at him, I saw that the back of his head was almost as hairless as his face, having only a few straggling yellow strands upon a grey scabrous. It's a fish. Then we reached the crest and beheld the outspread valley beyond, where the Manizette joins the sea just north of the long line of cliffs that culminate in Kingsport Head and veer off towards Cape Ann. On the far misty horizon, I could just make out the dizzy profile of the head, topped by the queer ancient house of which so many legends are told. But for the moment, all my attention was captured by the nearer panorama just below me. I realized, come face to face with rumor shadowed Innsmouth. It was a town of wide extent and dense construction, yet one with a portentous dearth of visible life. From the tangle of chimney pots, scarcely a wisp of smoke came, and the three tall steeples loomed stark and unpainted against the seaward horizon. One of them was crumbling down at the top, and in that and another there were only black gaping holes where clock dials should have been. The vast huddle of sagging gambrel roofs and peaked gables conveyed with offensive clearness the idea of wormy decay, and as we approached along the now descending road, I could see that many roofs had wholly caved in. There were some large square Georgian houses too, with hip roofs, cupolas, and railed widow's walks. These were mostly well back from the water, and one or two seemed to be moderately sound condition. Stretching inland from among them, I saw the rusted, grass-grown line of the abandoned railway, with leaning telegraph poles now devoid of wires, and the half-obscured lines of the old carriage roads, Rowley and Ipswich. I think Even might be doing whatever he's doing after stream, post-stream stuff. Might not actually be here. The decay was worse close to the waterfront, though in its very midst I could spy the white belfry of a fairly well-preserved brick structure which looked like a small factory. The harbour, long clogged with sand, was enclosed by an ancient stone breakwater on which I could begin to discern the minute forms of a few seated fishermen, and at whose end were what looked like the foundations of a bygone lighthouse. A sandy tongue had formed inside this barrier, and upon it I saw a few decrepit cabins, more dories, and scattered lobster pots. The only deep water seemed to be where the river poured out past the belfry structure and turned southward to join the ocean. Here and there the ruins of wharves jutted out from the shore to end in indeterminate rottenness, those farther south seeming the most decayed, and far out at sea, despite a high tide, I glimpsed a long black line scarcely rising above the water, yet carrying a suggestion of odd latent malignancy. This I knew must be This I knew must be Devil Reef. As I looked, a subtle, curious sense of beckoning superadded to the grim repulsion. Oddly enough, I found this overtone more disturbing than the primary impression. We met no one on the road, but presently began to pass deserted farms, varying stages of ruin. When I noticed a few inhabited houses with rags stuffed in the broken windows and shells and dead fish laying about the littered yards. Once or twice I saw listless-looking people working in barren gardens or digging clams on the fishy-smelling beach below. Groups of dirty, simian-visaged children playing around weed-grown doorsteps. Somehow these people seemed more disquieting than the dismal buildings, for almost every one had certain peculiarities, face emotions, which I instinctively disliked without being able to define or comprehend them. For a second I thought this typical physique just some picture I had seen, perhaps in a book, under circumstances of particular horror or melancholy. But this pseudo recollection passed very quickly. As the bus reached a lower level, I began to catch the steady note of a waterfall through the unnatural stillness. The leaning, unpainted houses li- grew thicker, lined both sides of the road, and displayed more urban tendencies than did those we were leaving behind. The panorama ahead had contracted the street scene, and in spots I could see where a cobblestone pavement and stretches of brick sidewalk had formerly existed. All the houses were apparently deserted, and there were occasional gaps where tumble-down chimneys and cellar walls told of buildings that had collapsed. Pervading everything was the most nauseous fishy odor. Soon, cross streets and junctions began to appear, those on the left leading to shoreward realms of unpaved squalor and decay, while those in the right showed vistas of departed grandeur. So far I had seen no people in the town, but there now came signs of a sparse habitation, certain windows here and there, and an occasional battered motor car at the curb. Pavement and sidewalks were increasingly well defined, and though most of the houses were quite old wood and brick structures of the early 19th century, they were obviously kept fit for habitation. As an amateur antiquarian, I almost lost my olfactory disgust and my feeling of menace and repulsion amidst this rich, unaltered survival from the past. But I was not to reach my destination without one very strong impression of poignantly disagreeable quality. The bus had come to a sort of open concourse or radial point, churches on two sides and the bedraggled remains of a circular green in the centre. And I was looking at a large pillared hall on the right-hand junction ahead. The structure's once white paint was now grey and peeling, and the black and gold sign on the pediment so faded that I could only with difficulty make out the words Esoteric Order of Dagon. This, then, was the former Masonic hall, now given over to a degraded cult. As I strained to decipher this inscription, my notice was distracted by the raucous tones of a cracked bell across the street, and I quickly turned to look out the window on my side of the coach. The sound came from a squat stone church of manifestly later date than most of the houses, built in a clumsy Gothic fashion and having disproportionately high basement with shutter windows. Though the hands of its clock were missing on the side, I knew that those hoarse strokes were tolling the hour of 11. Hello, Empire. 30k. 30k. Then suddenly all thoughts of time were blotted out by an onrushing image of sharp intensity and unaccountable horror which had seized me before I knew what it really was. The door of the church basement was open, revealing a rectangle of blackness inside, and as I looked, a certain object crossed or seemed to cross the dark rectangle, burning into my brain a momentary conception of nightmare, which was all the more maddening because analysis could not sepulture single nightmarish quality in it. How are you, Empire? It was a living object, the first except the driver that I had seen since entering the compact part of the town, and had I it. Merrily raid. Hello. Thanks for the raid, Milnix. Hello. Merrily beats us if we don't raid. It really beats up if we don't raid. Hello. Thanks for the raid. Thanks for the follows. Vinny. Ark. Millinix. A jester of pixels doth stream. Comfy and chill their realm doth seem. Verily they play Apex. Mirthful glee. When slag doth plague, 'tis not thou, but they forsooth daily doses merrily. Sweet songs and cold. Who's off tomorrow, riddle oft told. Methinks this dream like summer's day, scaredy cat, though pixels may abound, thou be led astray. Hello! Thanks for the raid. Thanks for the follow. Hello, hello. I love that you're reading. I struggle with reading. Reading's hard. Yo for the follow, my Cecil. 5040. And Mally. And why hello, Mizzy. Hello. Reading is hard. I swear I'm getting a tongue cramp, but I don't think it's a tongue cramp. My tongue just not working right now. So reading is very hard. Thanks for the raid. Read us to sleep. I will try. I will try. I hope your stream went well though. I hope your stream went well. Lurking, I'm in a game. Okay. Good luck with the game. I hope the stream went well. Were you doing Apex or something like that? I think. Probably. Apex, yes. I've never done FPS game. I've never played FPS game. I probably should. I probably should one day. Do it at least once. Yes, I shall try to read you guys to sleep. Have a good rest of the week. I'm going to sleep. Okay. Hello, Aussie. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Oi, oi, oi. Oi, oi, oi. Oi, oi, oi. Yeah. Melbourne, Sydney? Depends. I am currently trapped, not in Melbourne, not in Sydney. I'm trapped in Victoria, not Melbourne. I am from Sydney. Is that what you guys say? Yeah. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Oi, oi, oi. Avatar's beautiful. Thank you. I grew up in Sydney. I sleep now. Okay. I only recently came to Victoria. Thanks for the follow. To sleep now as well. Okay, have good sleep. Fella Sid, aye. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Have good sleep. Sleep well. Aussie, Aussie. Oi, oi, oi. Oi, oi, oi. Good night. Umo. Thanks for the follow. Yes, I will hydrate. Scared you? What scared you?
Thank you for liking my voice.
Oh.
Rest in peace.
Oh. Oh. Yeah, that's the thing. I do a devil voice. That's my demon voice, you know? Oh, the items being thrown. Ah. Hmm. Items being thrown. Okay, where am I up to? Huh? Ah. It was a living object, the first except the driver that I had seen entering the compact part of the town, and had I been in a mood, I would have found nothing whatever of terror in it. Slowly, as I realized a moment later, it was a pastor, clad in some peculiar vestments, doubtless. The Lord of Dagon had modified churches, thing which had probably caught my first subconscious glance and supplied the touch of bizarre horror was the tall tiara he wore. An almost exact duplicate of the one Miss Tilton had shown the previous evening. This acting on my imagination had applied namelessly sinister qualities to the indeterminate and robed, shambling form beneath it. There was not, I soon decided, any reason why I should have felt that shuddering touch of evil pseudo memory. Was it not natural that a local mystery cult should adopt among its regimentals a unique type of headdress made familiar to the community in some strange way, perhaps as treasure trove, treasure trove. Yeah. A very thin sprinkling of repellent looking youngish people now became visible on the sidewalks. Lone individuals knots of 2 or 3. The lower floors of the crumbling houses sometimes harbored small shops with signs, and I noticed a parked truck or two as we ran. The sound of waterfalls became more and more distinct. Presently, I saw a fairly deep river gorge, and by a wide iron-railed highway beyond which a large square opened out. As we clanked over the bridge, I looked out on both sides and observed some factory buildings on the edge of the grassy bluff, or part way down. The water far below was very abundant, and I could see 2 vigorous sets of oars upstream on my right and at least one downstream. From this point, the noise was quite deafening, and we rolled into the large semicircular across the river and up on the right-hand side of a tall cupola-crowned building with remnants of yellow paint, half effaced, claiming it to be the Gilman House. I was glad to get out of that bus, and at once proceeded to check my valise in the shabby hotel lobby. There was only one person in sight, an elderly man without what I had come to call the Innsmouth look, and I decided not to ask him any of the questions which bothered me, remembering that odd things had been noticed in this hotel. Instead, I strolled out on the square from which the bus had already studied the scene minutely and appraisingly. One side of the cobblestone open space was a straight line of the river. The other was a semicircle of slant-roofed brick buildings of about the 1800 period, from which several streets radiated away to the southeast, south, and southwest. Lamps were depressingly few and small, all low-powered incandescents, and I was glad that my plan called for departure before dark, even though I knew the moon would be bright. Buildings were all in fair condition, and included perhaps a dozen shops in current operation, of which one was a grocery of the First Nation chain, others a dismal restaurant, a drugstore, and a wholesale fish dealer's office. Still another at the eastward extremity of the square near the river, an office of the town's only industry, a Marsh Refining Company. There were perhaps 10 people visible, and 4 or 5 automobiles and motor trucks stood scattered about. I did not need to be told that this was the civic center of Innsmouth.
Thank you for liking my voice.
Thank you.
Rest in peace.
Eastward, I could catch blue glimpses of the harbour, against which rose the decayed remains of 3 once beautiful Georgian steeples. Nigh toward the shore, on the opposite bank of the river, I saw that white belfry mounting what I took to be the Marsh Refinery. For some reason or other, I chose to make my first inquiries at the chain grocery, whose personnel was not likely to be native to Innsmouth. I found a solitary boy of about 17 in charge, and was pleased to note the brightness and affability which promised cheerful information. He seemed exceptionally eager to talk, and I soon gathered that he did not like the place, the fishy smell of its furtive people. A word with any outsider was a relief to him. He hailed from Arkham, boarded with a family who came from Ipswich, and went back whenever he got a moment off. His family did not like him to work in Innsmouth, but the chain had transferred him there, and he did not wish to give up his job. There was, he said, no public library or chamber of commerce in Innsmouth, but I could probably find my way about. The street I had come down was Federal. West of that were the fine old residences, Broad, Washington, Lafayette, Adams, and east of it were the shoreward slums. It was in these slums, though, along Main Street, that I would find the old Georgian churches, but they were all long abandoned. They were all long abandoned. It would be well not to make oneself too conspicuous in such neighborhoods, especially north of the river, since the people were sullen and hostile. Some strangers had even disappeared. Certain spots were almost forbidden territory, as he had learned at considerable cost. One One must not, for example, linger much around the Marsh refinery, or around any of the still used churches, or around the pillared order of Dagon Hall at Newchurch Green. Those churches were very odd, or violently disavowed by their respective denominations elsewhere, and apparently using the queerest kind of ceremonials and clerical vestments. Their creeds were heterodox and mysterious, involving hints of certain marvelous transformations leading to bodily immorality of a sort this earth. The youth's own pastor, Dr. Wallace of Ashbury M.E. Church in Arkham, had gravely urged him not to join any church in Innsmouth. As for the Innsmouth people, the youth hardly knew what to make of them. They were as furtive and seldom seen as animals that live in burrows, and one could hardly imagine how they passed the time apart from their desultory fishing. Perhaps, judging from the quantities of bootleg liquor they consumed, they lay for most of the daylight's hours in an alcoholic stupor. They seemed suddenly banded together in some sort of fellowship and understanding, despising the world as if they had access to other and preferable spheres of entity. Their appearance, especially their staring, unwinking eyes, which one never saw shut, was certainly shocking enough, and their voices were disgusting. It was awful to hear them chanting in their churches at night, especially during their main festival or revivals, which fell twice a year on April 30th and October 31st. They were very fond of the water and swam a great deal in both river and harbour. Swimming races out to Devil Reef were very common, and everyone in sight seemed well able to share in this arduous sport. When one came to think of it, it was generally only rather young people who were seen about in public, and of these the oldest were apt to be the most tainted looking. When exceptions did occur, they were mostly persons with no trace of aberrancy, like the old clerk at the hospital. One wondered what became of the bulk of the older folk, and whether the Innsmouth look were not a strange and insidious disease phenomenon which increased its hold as years advanced. Only a rare affliction, of course, could bring about such vast and radical anatomical changes in a single individual after maturity. Changes invoking osseous factors as basic as the shape of the skull, but then even this aspect was no more baffling and unheard of than the visible features of the malady as a whole. It would be hard, the youth implied, to form any real conclusions regarding such a matter, since one never came to know the natives personally, no matter how long one might live in tongue. Um, the youth was certain that many specimens, even worse than the visible ones, were kept locked indoors in some places. People sometimes heard the queerest kind of sounds. The tottering wet waterfront hovels north of the river were reputedly connected by hidden tunnels, being thus a veritable warren of unseen abnormalities. What kind of foreign blood, if any, these beings had, it was impossible to tell. They sometimes kept certain, especially repulsive characters out of sight when government and others from the outside world town. It would be of no use, my informant said, to ask the natives anything about the place. The only one who would talk was a very aged but normal-looking man who lived in the poorhouse on the north rim of the town, his time walking about or lounging around the fire station. This hoary character, Zadok Allen, was 96 years old, somewhat touched in the head, besides being the town drunkard. It was a strange, furtive creature who constantly looked over his shoulder as if afraid of something, and when sober could not be persuaded to talk at all with strangers. He was, however, unable to resist any offer of his favourite poison. Once drunk, would furnish the most astounding fragments of whispered reminiscence. After all, though, little useful data could be gained from him. His stories were all insane, incomplete hints of possible marvels and horrors, would have no source to. no source save in his own disordered fancy. Nobody ever believed him, but the natives did not like him to drink and talk with strangers, and it was not always safe to be seen questioning him. It was probably from him that some of the wildest popular whispers and delusions derived. As for business, the abundance of fish was certainly almost uncanny, but the natives were taking less and less advantage of it. Moreover, the prices were falling and competition was growing. Of course, the town's real business was the refinery. The commercial office was on the square only a few doors east. Old Man Marsh was never seen, but sometimes went to the works in a closed curtained car. There were all sorts of rumours about how Marsh had come to look. He had once been a great dandy, and people said he still wore the frock coat refinery of the Edwardian age, curiously adapted to certain deformities. His son had formerly conducted the office, but latterly they had keeping out of sight a good deal and leaving the brunt of the affairs to the younger generation. The sons and the sisters had come to look very queer, especially the older ones, and it was said that their health was failing. Hello, Brainy Gormand. Hello. One of the Marsh daughters was a repellent reptilian looking woman who wore an excess of weird jewelry clearly of the same exotic tradition as that to which the strange tiara belonged. My informant had noticed it many times and had heard it spoken of as coming from some secret horde, either of pirates or of demons. The clergymen or priests or whatever they're called nowadays also wore this kind of ornament as a headdress, but one seldom caught glimpses of them. Other specimens the youth had not seen, though many were rumoured to exist around Innsmouth. I missed a side smile. You mentioned it, so I got rid of it. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. The Marshes, together with the other three gently bred families of the town, the Waits, the Gilmans, and the Elliots, were all very retiring. They lived in immense houses along Washington Street, and several were reputed to harbour in concealment certain living kingsfolk, whose personal aspect forbade public view and whose death had been reported and recorded, warning me that many of the street signs were down. The youth drew for my benefit a rough but ample and painstakingly sketched map of the town's salient features. After a moment's study, I felt sure that it would be of great help and pocketed it with profuse thanks. Disliking the dinginess of the single restaurant I had seen, I bought a fair supply of cheese crackers and ginger wafers to serve as a lunch later on. My program, I decided, would be to thread the principal streets, talk with any non-natives I might encounter, and catch the 8 o'clock coach for Arkham. The town, I could see, formed a significant, exaggerated example of communal decay, but being no sociologist, I would limit my serious observations to the field of architecture. Thus, I began my systematic, though half bewildered, tour of Innsmouth's narrow, shadow blighted ways. Crossing the bridge and turning towards the roar of the lower falls, I passed close to the Marshes refinery, which seemed to be oddly free from the noise of industry. The building stood on the steep river bluff near the bridge and an open confluence of streets which I took to the earliest civic centre, displaced after the revolution by the present. Recrossing the gorge on the Main Street Bridge, I struck a region of utter desertion, which somehow made me shudder. Collapsing huddles of gambrel roofs formed a jagged and fantastic skyline, above which rose the ghoulish and decapitated steeple of an ancient church. Some houses along Main Street were tenanted, but most were tightly boarded up. Down unpaved side streets, I saw the black gaping windows of deserted hovels, many of which leaned at perilous and incredible angles through the sinking part of the foundations. Those windows stared so spectrally that they took courage to turn eastward towards the waterfront. Certainly, the terror of a deserted house swells in geometrical rather than arithmetical progression as houses multiply to form a city of stark desolation. The sight of such endless avenues of fishy eyed vacancy and death, and the thought of such linked infinities of black, brooding compartments given over to cobwebs and memories and the conqueror worm start up vestigial fears and aversions that not even the stoutest philosophy can disperse. How much longer you plan? Might sleep too while I was listening. Yeah, go sleep, go sleep. I don't know. I don't exactly know how long I plan to stay around. Hello, Indigo. I'm struggling. Words are hard. What time is it for you? 8:37 p.m. You have a very calming voice, thank you. 1:37, yeah, go to sleep. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. What am I up to? The sight of such endless avenues of fishy-eyed vacancy and death, and the thought of such linked infinities of black brooding compartments given over to cobwebs and memories, the conqueror worm start up vestigial fears and aversions that not even the stoutest philosophy can. How much would I need to pay you to read me a bedtime story? Is this not a bedtime story? It's about fish people. It's about fish people living as humans. Fish Street was as deserted as Maine, though it differed in having many brick and stone warehouses still in excellent shape. 10:38. Go to sleep. Water Street was almost its duplicate, save that there were great seaward gaps where wharves had been. Not a living thing did I see except for the scattered distant breakwater, and not a sound did I hear save the lapping of the harbour tides and the roar of the falls. Manizet. The town was getting more and more on my nerves, and I looked behind me furtively as I picked my way over the tottering Water Street Bridge. The Fish Street Bridge, according to the sketch, was in ruins. I need you to stream at 2 a.m. for you and 8 p.m. for me. No. No. And no. And no, 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 no. No way. Nope. 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 These chapters are getting pretty dense and nothing's happening. If we ignore the sporadic appearance of the fish people, yeah, it's just I noticed it's only been 2 stories from Lovecraft. I noticed that most of it is just a guy visiting a place and describing what they see. Please, pretty please, no. And no. You can just listen to a VOD when you're ready to sleep. North of the river, there were traces of squalid life. Active fish packing houses in Water Street, smoking chimneys, and patched roofs here and there. Occasional sounds from indeterminate sources, and a frequent shambling in the dismal streets, unpaved lanes. I seem to find this even more oppressive than southerly, southerly desertion. For one thing, the people were more hideous and abnormal than those near the centre of the town, so that I was several times evilly reminded of something utterly fantastic I could not quite place. Undoubtedly, the alien strain in the Innsmouth folk, stronger here than farther inland, unless, indeed, the Innsmouth look were a disease rather than a bloodstain, in which case this district might be held to harbour the more cases. There's a gradual creeping sense of wrongness. It's not high action. It's not. It's definitely just someone just walking around and seeing what happens. And writing it before disappearing. Pretty obvious pattern to it. Ah. Well, I mean, I've only finished one story, so. Fish people. One detail that annoyed me was the distribution of the few faint sounds I heard. They ought naturally to have come wholly from the visibly inhabited houses, yet in reality were often strongest inside the most rigidly boarded facades. There were creakings, scurryings, and hoarse, doubtful noises, and I thought uncomfortably about the hidden tunnel suggested by the grocery boy. Suddenly, I found myself wondering what the voices of the denizens would be like. I hadn't heard no speech so far in this quarter, and was unaccountably anxious not to do so. Most of them are told in first person because the stories typically show that the more about the Lovecraftian creature you know, the more you descend into madness. Oh. Oh. It makes sense. It's easier to show madness first person. Pausing only long enough to look at two fine but ruinous old churches at Main and Church Street, I hastened out of that vile waterfront slum. My next logical goal was New Church, but somehow or other I could not bear to repass a church in whose basement the inexplicably frightening form that strangely diademed priest or pastor. Besides, the grocery youth had told me that churches as well as the Order of Dagon Hall were not advisable neighbors for strangers. Will you ever do Mummy Comforts You Till You Fall Asleep ASMR? No. As if you can find a script that is not romantic, sexual, or yeah, any of that, then yeah, maybe. But yeah, probably not. I think it's just because a lot of the ASMR scripts are very sexual, so I'm just not comfortable doing it. There's words of affirmation ASMR. I don't even know what that is. Words of affirmation. I think for me, it's just that it's very cringy for me because I personally don't. I think I'm just not used to it, like words of affirmation and praises and all that kind of stuff. I'm just not used to it. And so me trying to say these things is just like, yee. Basically encouragement, except non-romantic sexual. I don't see a lot of them. I was joking, but I may look for one. Just to see something. Yeah. Just non-romantic, non-sexual stuff. Because I think I'm just not comfortable with it. Yeah. Like you've been working hard. It's if we have break, be nice to yourself. Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of those actually. Actually, there was a good one I sent someone. I found a nice script and sent it to someone. I might look for that. Because usually when I see a script and it's very sexual and romantic and whatnot, I just I don't even look at it. It's not a lot. And if I knew how to write scripts, I would, but I don't. As you can see, I even struggle to read. How can I write scripts? Accordingly, I kept north along Main to Martin, then turning inland, crossing Federal Street safely north of the Green, and entering the decayed patrician neighborhood of Northern Broad. Washington, Lafayette, and Adams Street. Though these stately old avenues was ill-surfaced, unkempt, their elm-shaded dignity had not entirely departed. Mansion after mansion, my gaze, most of them decrepit and boarded up amid neglected grounds, but one or two in each street showing signs of occupancy. In Washington Street, there was a row of 4 or 5 in excellent repair, and with finely tended lawns and gardens. The most sumptuous of these, with wide terraced parterres extending back the whole way to Lafayette Street, I took to be the home of Old Man Marsh, the afflicted refinery owner. In all these streets no living thing was visible, and I wondered at the complete absence of cats and dogs from Innsmouth, and another thing which puzzled and disturbed me even in some of the best preserved mansions, tightly shuttered conditions of the third story. Furtiveness and secretiveness are universal in this hushed city of alienage and death, and I could not escape the sensation of being watched from ambush on every hand by sly, staring eyes that never shut. I shivered as a cracked stroke of 3 sounded from a belfry on my left. Too well did I recall the squat church from which those notes came from. Following Washington Street towards the river, I now faced a new zone of former industry, commerce, noting the ruins of a factory ahead, others with the trace of an old railway station and covered railway bridge beyond up the gorge on my right. The uncertain bridge now before me posted with a warning sign. I took the risk and crossed again to the south bank where traces of life reappeared. Furtive, shambling creatures stared cryptically in my direction, and more normal faces eyed me coldly and curiously. Innsmouth was rapidly becoming tolerable, and I turned down Payne Street, where, in the hope of getting some vehicle to take me to Arkham before the still distant starting time of that bus. Ricky Rift Polecat. Oh, hi. You're reading books on stream now? Yes. It was then I saw the tumble down fire station on my left and noticed a red faced, bushy bearded, watery eyed old man in nondescript rags who sat on a bench in front of it talking with a pair of unkempt but not abnormal looking firemen. This, of course, must be Zadok Allen, the half crazed, licorice, non non-agenarian whose tales of old Innsmouth and its shadow were so hideous and incredible. Change your name, did you? That was chapter 2. That was chapter 2. Maybe we can do the whole thing. That was hard. You did change your name? Chapter 3. It must have been some imp of the perverse, or some sardonic pull from dark hidden sources, which made me change my plan. I had long before resolved to limit my observations to architecture alone, and I was even then hurrying towards the square in an effort to get quick transportation out of this festering city of death and decay. But the sight of old Zadok Allen set up new currents in my mind and made me slacken my pace uncertain. To what it is now. Yeah. If I fight against the tide, we could finish it. But do you want to finish it today? In an hour 50. Maybe I could do chapter 3 today, and then I'll do 4 and 5 in 2 weeks. Not next week. I won't be streaming next week. Monday. It'll be 2 weeks Monday. I won't finish it today. So this one will be the last chapter. I had been assured that the old man could do nothing but hint at wild, disjointed, and incredible legends, and I had been warned that the natives made it unsafe to be talking with him. Yet the thought of this aged witness to the town's decay, with memories going back to the early days of ships and factories, was a lure that no amount of reason could make me resist. After all, the strangest and maddest of myths, often merely symbols or allegories based upon truth. And old Zadok must have seen everything which went on around Innsmouth for the last 90 years. Curiosity flared up beyond sense and caution, and in my youthful egotism, fancied I might be able to sift a nucleus of real history from the confused, extravagant outpouring I would probably extract aid of raw whiskey. I knew that I could not accost him then and there, for the fireman would surely notice and object. That I reflected, I would prepare by getting some bootleg liquor at a place where the grocery boy had told me it was plentiful. Then I would loaf near the fire station in apparent casualness and fall in with old Zadok after he had started on one of his frequent rambles. Frequent rambles. Youth had said that he was very restless, seldom sitting around the station for more than an hour. He's basically gonna go find alcohol and sort of low-key drug him. A quart bottle of whiskey was easily, though not cheaply, obtained in the rear of a dingy variety store just off the square in Elliot Street. The dirty-looking fellow who waited on me had a touch of the staring Innsmouth look, but was quite civil in his way, being perhaps used to the custom of such convivial strangers, truckmen, bill buyers, and the like, as were occasionally in town. Re-entering the square, I saw that the luck was with me, for shuffling out of Payne Street, around the corner of the Gilman house, I glimpsed nothing less than the tall, lean, tattered form of old Zadok Allen himself. In accordance with my plan, I attracted his attention by brandishing my newly purchased bottle, and soon realized that he had begun to shuffle wistfully after me as I turned into Waite Street on my way to the most deserted region of. I was steering my course by the map the grocery boy had prepared and was aiming for the wholly abandoned stretch of southern waterfront which I had previously visited. The only people in sight there had been the fishermen on the distant breakwater. By going a few squares north, I could get beyond the range of these, finding a pair of seats on some abandoned wharf, and being free to question old Zadok unobserved for an indefinite time. Before I reached the main street, I could hear faint and wheezy, "Hey, mister," behind me, and I presently allowed the old man to catch up and take copious pulls from the quartz bottle. I began pulling out feelers as we walked amidst the omnipresent desolation and crazily tilted ruins. Found that the aged tongue did not loosen as quickly as I had expected. At length I saw grass grown opening towards the sea, between crumbling brick walls, the weedy length of an earth and masonry wharf projecting beyond. Piles of moss-covered stones near the water promised tolerable seats, and the scene was sheltered from all possible view by a ruined warehouse on the. Here I thought was the ideal place for a long secret colloquy. So I guided my companion down the lane and picked out spots to sit in among the mossy stones. The air of death and desertion was ghoulish, and the smell of fish was almost insufferable. But I was resolved to let nothing deter me. About 4 hours remained for conversation if I were to catch the 8 o'clock coach for Arkham, and I began to dole out more liquor to the ancient tippler, meanwhile eating my own frugal lunch. In my donation, I was careful to not overshoot the mark, for I did not wish Zadok's Venus Garrulinus pass into a stupor. After an hour, his furtive taciturnity showed signs of disappearing, and much to my disappointment, he still sidetracked my questions about Innsmouth and its shadow-haunted past. He would babble of current topics, revealing a wide acquaintance with newspapers and a great tendency to philosophize in a sententious village fashion. Towards the end of the second hour, I feared my quart of whiskey would not be enough to produce results, and was wondering whether I had better leave old Zadok go back for more. Just then, however, chance made the opening which my questions had been unable to make. The wheezing ancient ramblings took a turn that caused me to lean forward and listen alertly. My back was towards the fishy-smelling sea, but he was facing But he was facing it, and something or other had caused his wandering gaze to light on the distant line of Devil Reef, and showing plainly and almost fascinatingly above the waves. The sight seemed to displease him. He began a series of weak curses which ended in confidential whispers and unknowing leer. He bent towards me, took hold of my coat lapel, and hissed out some hints that could not be mistaken. Man, this is going to be hard to read. That's where it all began. That cursed place of all wickedness where the deep water starts. Gate o' hell, sheer drop down to a bottom no sounding line Kintech. Old Captain Obed done it. Him that found out morn was good for him in the South Sea Islands. With eating with accent, I was like, this gives a fascinating touch. I'm struggling and trying and oh, he talks for a while, huh? Everybody was in a bad way them days. Trading falling off, mills loosened business, even the new ones, and the best of our men folks stood privateering in the war of 1812 or lost with a lazy brig and the Ranger scow, both on the Gilman Ventures. Obed Marsh, he had 3 ships afloat, Brigantine Columbia, Brig Hefty, and bark Symmetry Queen. He was the only one as kept on with the East India and Pacific trade. Though Esdras Martin's barkentine Malay bride made a venture as late as 28. Never was nobody like Captain Obed, old limp o' Satan. I can mind him a telling about foreign parts and calling all the stupid folks for going to Christian meeting and bearing their burden meek and lowly. Says they'd ought to get better gods like some of the folks in the Ingies, gods as would bring them good fishing in return for their sacrifices and would really answer folks' prayers. Matt Elliot, his first mate, talked a lot too, only he was again folks doing any heathen things. Told about an island east of Otaheite, while there was a lot of stone ruins older than anybody knew anything about, kind or like them on Ponape on the Carolines, but with carvings of faces that looked like the big statues on Easter Island. There was a little volcano island near there too, while there was other ruins with different carvings, ruins all away like they'd been under the sea on, and with pictures of awful monsters all over them. 7112222, hi. Hi. Yeah, I haven't brushed my hair yet. Hi. While Sir Matt, he says the natives around there had all the fish they could catch, and sported bracelets and armlets and head rigs made about made out or a queer kind of gold and covered with pictures or mountains just like the ones carved over the ruins on the little islands. Sort of fish like frogs or frog like fishes that was drawn in all kinds of positions like they was human beings. Nobody could get out of them while they got all the stuff, and all the natives wondered how they managed to find fish in plenty even when the very next island had lean pickings. But he got to wondering too, and so did Captain Obed. Obed had noticed besides that lots of the handsome young folks would drop out of sight for good from year to year, and that there weren't many old folks around. He he thinks some of the folks looked thin, queer, even for Kanakis. Airbrushing ASMR was also good for a non-romantic one. Airbrushing. I don't have the ASMR mics. I don't know how I'm supposed to do hairbrushing. Thanks for planning. Thought you'd be fucking raining so much. By the way, don't forget to drink water so you don't have throat pain. Yes, I will drink. I do have a multi chat thing going on here, so I get both Twitch and YouTube chat in one go. It's just the I don't see every emote. That's my issue, and I don't see the channel point redeems. So if I need to be reminded of any. So don't brush your hair. Yeah, it hasn't been brushed for 2 years. It took Obed to get the truth out of him, heathen. I don't know how he done it, but he began by trading further gold-like things they wore, asked them where they come from and if they could get more, and finally wormed the story out of the old chief, Wallaki, they called him. Nobody but Obed would ever believe the old yellow devil, but the captain could read folks like they was books. Nobody ever believes me now when I tell him, and I don't suppose you will, young fella. Though come to look at you, ye have kind of got 'em sharp reading. That. The old man's whisper grew fainter, and I found myself shuddering at the terrible and sincere portentousness of his intonation, even though I knew his tale could be nothing but drunken fantasy. Well, sir, I'll bet he lot that they's things on this earth as most folks never heard about, and wouldn't believe if they did hear. It seems these Kanakis was sacrificing heaps of their young men and maidens to some kind of god things that lived under the sea, and getting all kinds of sepulture in return. They met the things on the little islet with the queer ones, and it seems them awful pictures or frogfish monsters supposed to be pictures of these things. Maybe they was the old kind old critters as got all the mermaid stories and such started. They had all kinds of cities in the sea bottom, and this island was heaved up from there. Seemed they was some of the things alive, and the stone buildings when the island come up sudden to the surface. That's how the Kanakis got wind they was down there. Down there. Made sign talk as soon as they got over being scared and pieced up a bargain afore long. I see. I just got tired of doing self study, so I'm here for my rest. Okay. Good luck with your studies. Them things like human sacrifices had had 'em ages afore, but lost track of this upper world after a time. What they'd done to the victims, it ain't for me to say, and I guess Obed wasn't none too sharp about asking. But it was all right with the heathens because they'd been having a hard time and was desperate about everything. They give a certain number of young folks to the sea things twice every year, May Eve and Halloween, regular as could be. Oh, also give some the carved knickknacks they made. The things agreed to give in return was plenty of fish. Drove them in front of they drove them in from all over the sea, and a few gold-like things now and then. While, as I says, the natives met the things on the little volcanic islet, going there in canoes with the sacrifices, etc., and bringing back any of the gold like jewels as was coming to them. At first, the things didn't never go onto the main island, but after a time, they come to want to. Seems they hankered after mixing with the folks and having gin ceremonies on the big days, May Eve and Halloween. You see, they was able to live both in and out of water. What they call amphibians, I guess. The Kanakis told them as how folks from the other islands might want to wipe them out if they got wind of their being there. But they say they don't care much because they could wipe out the whole brood of humans if they was willing to bother. that is, and he as didn't be certain signs such as was used on't by the lost old ones, whoever they was, but not wanting to bother they lay low when anybody visited the island. When it came to mating with them toad-looking fishes, the Kanakys kind of balked, but finally they learned something as put a new face on the matter. Seems that human folks has got a kind of relation to such water beasts that everything alive come out of the children onked and only needs a little change to go back again. Them things called the Kanakys that if they mix bloods, there'd be children as would look human at first, but later turn more and more like the things. So finally they take to the water and gen the main lot of things down here. And this is the important part, young fella. Them as turned into fish things as and went into the water wouldn't never die. Them things never died except they was killed violent. Thanks for the follow, Orange. While sir, wait. While sir, it seems by the time Obed knowed them islanders there was full of fish blood from them deep water things. When they got old and begun to sepulture, they was kept hid until they felt like taking to the water and quitting the place. Some was more tech than others, and some never did change quite enough to take to the water. But mostly they turned out just the way them things said. Them as was born more like the things changed early, but them as was nearly human sometimes stayed on this island till they was past 70, though they usually go down under for trial trips are for that. Folks as had took to the water generally come back a good deal to visits, so as a man would often be a talking to his own 5 times great grandfather who left the dry land a couple of hundred years or so afore. Everybody got out the idea of dying, except in canoe wars with the other islanders, or as sacrifices to the sea gods down below, or from snakebite or plague, or sharp galloping ailments, or something afore they could take to the water. Or simply looked forward to a kind of change that went a bit horrible after a while. They thought what they got was well worth all they had to give up, and I guess Obed kind of come to think the same himself when he chewed over old Wallachie stories a bit. Wallachie, though, was one of the few as hadn't got none of the fish blood, being of a royal line that intermarried with royal lines on other islands. Wallachie, he showed Obed a lot of rites and incantations as had to do with the sea things, and let him see some of the folks in the village as had changed a lot from human shape. Somehow or other, though he would never let him see though he would never let him see one of the regular things from right out of the water. In the end, he gave him a funny kind of thingamajig made out of lead or something that he said would bring up the fish things from any place in the water while there might be a nest of them. Idea was to drop it down with the right kind of prayers and such. It is Wallachie allowed as things were scattered all over the world, so as anybody that looked about could find a nest and bring them up if they was wanted. Thank you. It's been a while since I sneezed. Matt, he didn't like this business at all and wanted Obed should keep away from the island. I am okay, I just sneezed. But the captain was sharp for gain and found he could get gold-like things so cheap it would pay him to make a specialty of them. Things went on that way for years, and Obed got enough of that gold-like stuff to make him start the refinery and Wade's old run-down fulling mill. He didn't just sell the pieces like was, the folks would be all the time asking questions, all the same his crews would get a piece and dispose of it now and then, even though they were swore to keep quiet, and he let his women focus on some of the pieces. Thank you, Gunner Allen. And drink a little water, Sally. That's okay, I am drinking water. I'm gonna go toilet first though. I'll be back in 5 minutes, 2 seconds, a minute. Okay. Hello again. Okay. Well, come about 38 when I was 7 year old, Obed he found the island people all wiped out in Viage. Seems the other islanders had got wind of what was going on and had took matters into their own hands. Because they must have had, after all, them old magic signs. See things was the only things they was of. No telling what any of them panikies would chance to get a hold of when the sea bottom throws up some island. Ruins older than the deluge. Older than the deluge. Pious cusses these was, they didn't leave nothing standing on either the main island or the little volcanic islet. Parts of the ruins were too big to knock down. Some places there was little stones strewed about like charms with something on them, like what you call a swastika nowadays. Probably them was the old one signs. Folks all wiped out, no traces of no gold-like things, and none the nearby Kanakis would breathe a word about the matter. Wouldn't even admit there ever been any people on that island. That naturally hit Obed pretty hard, seeing as his normal trade was poor. Hit the whole of Innsmouth too, because in seafaring days, what profited the master of a ship generally profited a crew proportionate. Most of the folks around the town took the hard times kind of sheep-like and resigned, but they was in bad shape because the fishing was bring out and the mills was doing none too well. Then there's the time Obed he began a cursing at the folk for being dull sheep and praying to a Christian heaven as didn't help him none. He told him he know old folks as pray to gods, give something you really need, and says if a good bunch of men would stand by him, could maybe get a hold of certain powers as would bring plenty of fish and quite a bit of gold. Of course, them as served on the Sumatra Queen and see the island knowed that what he meant and want none too anxious to get close to see things like heard tell on. But them as didn't know what 'twas all about got kind of swayed by what Obed had to say and began to ask him what he could do to sit on the way to the faith as would bring results. Finally, normal English. Here the old man faltered, mumbled, and lapsed into a moody and apprehensive silence, glancing nervously over his shoulder and then turning back to stare fascinatedly at the distant black. When I spoke to him, he did not answer, so I knew I would have to let him finish the bottle. The insane yarn I was hearing interested me profoundly. I fancied there was for I fancied there was contained within a sort of crude allegory based upon the strangeness of and elaborated by an imagination at once creative, full of scraps of exotic legend. Not for a moment did I believe that the tale had any real substantial foundation, but nonetheless the account held a hint of genuine terror, if only because it brought in references to strange jewels, really akin to the maligned tiara I had seen at Newburyport. Perhaps the ornaments had, after all, come from some strange island, and possibly the wild stories were lies of the bygone Obed himself, rather than of this antique. I handed Zadok the bottle, and he drained it to the last drop. It was curious how he could stand so much whiskey, but not even a trace of thickness come into his high, wheezy voice. He licked the nose of the bottle, slipped it into his pocket, and then beginning to nod and whisper softly to himself. Went close to catch any articulate words he might utter, and thought I saw a sardonic smile behind his stained whiskers. Yes, he was really forming words, and I could grasp a fair proportion. He was whispering this, okay. Oh, Matt, he, alas, was again it. Tried to line up the folks on his side and had long talks with the preacher. No use. They run the congregational parsons our town, and the Methodist fellow quit. Never did see the Resolve Babcock, the Baptist parson again. Rather Jehovah, I was a mighty little critter, but I heard what I heard and seen what I seen. Dagon and Ashtoreth, Belial and Beelzebub, golden calf and the idols of Canaan and the Philistines, Babylonish abomination, mene, tekel, arson. He stopped again, and from the look in his watery blue eyes, I feared he was close to stupor after all. But when I gently shook his shoulder, he turned on me with astonishing alertness and snapped out some more obscure phrases. Don't believe me, hey? Hey, then just tell me, young fella, why Captain Obed and 20-odd other folks used to row out to Devil Reef in the dead of night and chant things so loud ya could hear them all over town when the wind was right. Tell me that, hey? And tell me why Obed was Alice dropping heavy things down into the deep water to the other side of the reef where the bottom shoots down like a cliff, low and yakin sound. Tell me what he done with that funny shaped lead thingamajig as Wallacky give him, hey boy? And did what did they all howl on May Eve and again the next Halloween? And why'd the new church pastors fellows as used to he sailors wear them queer robes and cover their sleeves with them gold like things? Obed brung, eh? My tummy's up. I'm energized again to continue studies. Thank you. Take care. Have lots of love days. Good luck with your studies. The watery blue eyes were almost savage and maniacal now. Maniacal now. Were almost savage and maniacal now, and the dirty white beard bristled electrically. Old Zadok probably saw me shrink back, for he began to cackle evilly. Beginning to see, eh? Maybe you like to bend me in them days when I see things at night out to sea about from the cupola top of my house. Oh, I can tell you little pitchers have big ears, and I want missing nothing of what was gossiped about Captain Bed and the folks out to the reefs. How about the night I took my past ship glass up to the cupola and seed the reef are bristling thick with shapes that dove off quick soon's a moon's riz. Obed and the folks was in a dory, and them shapes dove off the far side into the deep waters and never come up. How'd you like to be a little shaver alone up a couple of watching shapes as one's human shapes, huh? Thank you. Make sure you don't overwork. Okay, bye bye. Bye bye. I'm not overworking. Okay. The old man was getting hysterical, and I began to shiver with a nameless alarm. He laid a gnarled claw on my shoulder. It seemed to me that its shaking was not altogether that of mirth. Suppose one night ye seed something heavy heaved often Obed's dory beyond the reef, and then learned next day young fellow was missing from home. Hey, did anyone ever see hide or hair Miss Hiram Gilman again? Did they? And Nick Pierce, and Louis Waite, and Adoniram Southwick, and Henry Garrison, hey? Shapes talking sign language with their hands. Them as had real hands. Wow, sir, that was the time Obed began to get on his feet again. Dog see his three daughters are wearing gold-like things as nobody seen on them before, and smoke stared coming out the refinery chimney. Other folks was prospering too. Fish began to swim into the harbour fit to kill, and heaven knows what size cargoes we began to ship out to Newburyport, Arkham, and Boston. Was then Obed got the Old Branch Railroad put through. Some Kingsport fishermen heard about the catch and come up in sloops. Hello, Yashashi, but they was all lost. Nobody ever saw them again. And just then our folks organized the esoteric order of Dagon and bought Masonic Hall off and cavalry commandery for it. Hehehe. Matt Elliott was a Mason and again the selling, but he dropped out of sight just then. How are you doing? How's the reading? The reading is hard because I'm reading a drunken man's words. We're dealing with it. We're persevering. Remember, I ain't saying Obed was set on having things just like they was on that Kanaki Isle. I don't think he aimed as fast to do no mixing nor raise no young'uns to take to the water and turn into fishes with eternal life. He wanted them gold things and was willing to pay heavy, and I guess the others was satisfied for a while. In 46, the town's done some looking and thinking for itself. Too many folks missing too much wild preaching at meeting of a Sunday. Too much talk about that reef. I guess I done a bit by telling Selectman Maury what I seen from the cupola. There was a party one night as followed Obed's crowd out to the reef, and I heard shots betwixt the dories. Next day, Obed and 32 others was in jail, with everybody all wondering just what was afoot and just what charge again could he got to halt. God, if anybody looked ahead a couple weeks later when nothing had been thrown into the sea for that long. You know, with those something now, you're right. Thank you. Zadok was showing signs of fright and exhaustion, and I let him keep silence for a while, though glancing apprehensively at my watch. The tide had turned and was coming in now, and the sound of the waves to rouse him. I was glad of that tide, for high water, the fishy smell might not be so bad. Again I strained to catch his whispers. That awful night I seed them. I was up in the cupola, hordes of them, swarms of them, all over the reef and swimming up the harbour into the Manusette. God, what happens in the streets of Innsmouth that night? I rattled our door, but Pa wouldn't open. Then he climbed up the kitchen window with his musket to find Selectman Maury and sounds of the dead and the dying, shots and screams, shouting and Old Square and Town Square and New Church Green. Gale thrown upon proclamation treason, reported the plague when folks come in and found half a people missing. Nobody left but them as would join in and them things or else keep quiet. Never heard of my pa no more. The old man was panting and perspiring profusely. His grip on my shoulder tightened. Everything cleaned up in the morning, but there was traces. I bet he kinda takes charge and says things as going to be changed. Others will worship with us in meantime, and certain houses has got to entertain guests. They wanted to mix like they done with the Kanakis, and he, for one, didn't feel bound to stop him. Far gone was Obed, just like a crazy man on the subject. He says they brought us fish and treasure, and should have what they hankered after. Nothing was to be different from the outside, only we was to keep shy of strangers if we knowed what was good for us. we all had to take the oath of Dagon, and later on there was second and third oaths that some of us took. Them as would help special or get special rewards, gold and such. No use spoken for there was millions of them down there. They'd rather not start rising and wiping out humankind, but if they was given away and forced to, they could do a lot towards just that. We didn't have old charms to cut 'em off like folks in the South Sea, and them Kanakis ev- wouldn't wouldn't never give away their secrets. Yield up enough sacrifices and savage knickknacks and harborage in the town when they wanted, and they let well enough alone. Wouldn't bother no strangers as might bear tales outside, that is, without they got prying. All in the band of the faithful, Order of Dagon, and the children should never die. And go back to the Mother Hydra and Father Dagon, what we all came from, onked, Cthulhu, the Tagan, Cthulhu Riley, oh god, the Cthulhu talk. Old Zadok was fast lapsing into stark raving, and I held my breath. Poor soul, to what pitiful depths of hallucinations had his liquor, plus his hatred of the decay, alienage, and disease around him, brought that fertile, imaginative brain. It began to moan now, and tears were coursing down his channeled cheeks into the depths of his beard. Exactly. Cthulhu. God, what I seen saints I was 15 years old. Mene tekel you parsons. The folks was missing, and them as killed themselves, them as told things in Arkham or Ipswich or such places was all called crazy, like you're calling me right now. But God, what I seen, they'd have killed me long ago for what I know. Only I took the first and second oaths, old Dago of Ben Obed, so was protected unless a juror of improved. I told things knowing and deliberate, but I wouldn't take the third oath. I'd die. I'd rather take that. It got worse around civil time when children born sanct 46 began to grow up. Some of them, that is, I was afraid never did no prying after what awful night, and never seen one of them plus two in all my life. That is never no full-blooded one. I went to the war, and if I had a, and if I'd had any guts or sense, I'd never come back, but settled away from here. Folks wrote me things once so bad that I suppose was because government draftman was in town after 63. After the war, it was just as bad. It began to fall off, mills and shops shut down, shipping stopped, and the harbour choked up. Railroad give up, but they never stopped swimming in and out of the river from that cursed reef of Satan. And more attic windows got are boarded up, and more noises was heard in houses as once supposed to have nobody in them. Yeah, the story's a little bit weird now. Maybe this is why it's a lot of people's favorites, huh? Folks outside have their stories about us. Suppose she heard a plenty of them, seeing what questions she had asked, stories about things they see now and then, and about that query jewelry as still comes in from somewheres and ain't quite all melted up. But nothing never gets definite. Nobody will believe nothing. They call them gold-like things parrot loot, and allow the Innsmouth folks as foreign blood or is distempered or something. Besides them that lives here show off as many strangers as they can, and encourage the rest to not to get very curious, especially round night time. Beasts balk at the critters, horses was and mules, but when they got autos that was all right. In 46, Captain Obed took a second wife that nobody in the town never see. Some says he didn't want to, but was made to by them as he called in. Had 3 children by her. 2 has disappeared young, but 1 girl as looked like anybody else, and was educated in Europe. Obed finally got her married off by a trick. Arkham fella as didn't suspect nothing. Nobody outside have nothing to do with folks now. Barnabas Marsh, that runs the refinery now, is Obed's grandson by his first wife, son of Onesiphorus. His eldest son, his mother was another of them, as one never seen outdoors. Right now, Barnabas is about changed, can't shed his eyes no more, and is all out of shape. They say he still wears clothes, but he take to the water soon. Maybe he's tried it already. They do sometimes go down for little spells afore they go down for good. And been seed about in public fair night in on 10 year. Don't know how his poor wife can feel. She come from Ipswich, and they night lynched Barnabas when he courted her 50 odd years ago. But he died in 78, and all the generation is gone now. The first wife's children dead, the rest, God knows. The sound of the incoming tide was now very insistent, and little by little it seemed to change the old man's mood from maudling tearfulness to watchful fear. He would pause now and then to renew those nervous glances over his shoulder or out towards the reef, and despite the wild absurdity of his tale, I could not help beginning to share his apprehensiveness. Zadok now grew shriller, seemed to be trying to whip up his courage with louder speech. It is mostly the old man. Yeah. He's getting shriller, so I should be higher pitch, you know? I don't think I can.
Hey you, why don't you say something?
Yeah, I can't.
Hey you, why don't you say something? How'd you like it to hear living in a town like this with everything of rotting and dying and boarded up monsters crawling and bleating and barking and hopping around black cellars and attics everywhere you turn, eh? How'd you like to hear the howling night after night from the churches and order of Dagon Hill and know what's doing part of them howling? How'd you like to hear what comes from the awful reef every May Eve and howl mass, eh? Think the old man's crazy, eh? Well, so let me tell you, that ain't the worst. That was kind of cute though. Zadok was really screaming now, and the mad frenzy of his voice disturbed me more than I care to own. I think he won't care. Yeah, I'm not straining myself. I'm not straining myself. Scarecrow. Hello. Curse you, don't set staring at me with them eyes. I tell Urban Marsh he's in hell and he's got to stay there. Ha ha ha. In hell, I says. Can't get me. I hain't done nothing nor told nobody nothing. Scarecrow. Oh. Ah. Got it.
I'm up to? Oh, you young fella. Well, even if I hain't told nobody nothing yet, I'm a going to now. You just sit and listen and sit still and listen to me, boy. This is why I ain't never told nobody. I says I didn't get to do prying after that night, but I found things that about just the same. You want to know what the real horror is, hey? Well, it's this. It ain't what them fish devils has done, but what they're going to do. They're bringing things up about a war, where they come from, into the town. Been doing it for years and slackening up lately. Them houses north of the river betwixt water and main streets is full of them. Them devils and what they brung. And when they get ready, I say when they get, ever hear tell of a sloggoth? Hey, do you hear me? I tell you I know what them things be. I see 'em one night when a hideous suddenness and inhuman frightfulness of the old man's shriek almost made me faint. His eyes, looking past me towards the malodorous sea, were positively starting from his head, while his face was a mask of fear worthy of Greek tragedy. His bony claw dug monstrously into my shoulder, and he made no motion as I turned my head to look at whatever he had glimpsed. There was nothing that I could see, only the incoming tide, which, with perhaps one set of ripples, more local than the long-flung line of breakers. But now Zadok was shaking me, and I turned back to watch the melting of that fear-frozen face into a chaos of twitching eyelids and mumbling gums. Presently his voice came back, albeit as a trembling whisper. Get out of here! Get out of here! They seen us! Get out for your life! Don't wait for nothing! They know now! Run for it! Quick, out of this town! Another heavy wave dashed against the loosing masonry of the bygone wall, and changed the mad ancient whispers to another inhuman, curdling scream. Yeah! Yeah! Before I could recover my scattered wits, he had relaxed his clutch on my shoulder and dashed wildly inland towards the street, wheeling northward round the ruined warehouse wall. Joggled. I glanced back at the sea, but there was nothing there, and when I reached Water Street and looked along it towards the north, there was no remaining trace of Alan. Oh. Okay, that was chapter 3. I think that might be it. It's too much. It's too many words. Too much. Lockouts. What are we in the mood for today? We're right into art. I feel like art would fit the general mood / vibes. Art chapter, yeah. We're gonna raid into Peach. Peach is drawing, and we're also gonna say bye to YouTube. Bye, YouTube. Oh, bye, YouTube. Oh, someone just said hi from YouTube. Oh my god.